Welcome to this edition of NYSE Governance Services Inside Compliance. My name is Eric Moorhead, Vice President and Senior Compliance Counsel with NYSE Governance Services Corpedia. And I'm pleased to have with me today Lamond Kearse, the Chief Compliance Officer of the Metropolitan Transportation Authority. Thank you for joining us, Lamond.
It's my pleasure.
Lamond, MTA has over 8 million customers per day, 800,000 buses and trains on the tracks and on the roads every day, and over 60,000 employees. There's a lot of data, a lot of information flowing out there that a compliance officer and the Metropolitan Transit Authority has to keep track of. Well, how are some ways that you get your arms initially around all of that data and information?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, when I first started at the MTA, I think I knew what most people know about the MTA. You get on the subway in the morning, or you get on your bus, and that's all you think about when you think about the MTA. Mm-hmm. But then you realize it's more than that. It's subways, it's buses, it's bridges and tunnels, it's construction, it's insurance, it's art, it's so many different things. And with all of those added components, you have additional amounts of data and information to kind of get your hands on. So the first thing I think I realized when I started there was that there is absolutely no way to get a handle on everything that exists within the MTA's umbrella. So the key is to really figure out what was significant, what was important for the organization and for myself in terms of being able to fulfill my responsibilities as Chief Compliance Officer. So you have to be selective about the amount of data that you start looking at, especially if you're new to an organization.
Mm-hmm. And that brings up a good point. A lot of organizations are not only just starting to look at the data that they have, but are just starting to use technology. Can you tell us about some easy wins, some starting points for organizations that are just starting to get their hands around this?
Okay, I will first have to say there is going to be no easy wins. Oftentimes I've heard people say, is there some easy way to do this or some easy solution? There's nothing easy about compliance. I think if you talk to almost any compliance officer, easy is not in our vocabulary. Mm-hmm. But I think to a large extent what you really need to do is, if there's already a program in place, to look at the information that's being gathered by that program. You would be surprised at what information is already being gathered in your operating units. So you don't need to start from scratch. And I think that's often a mistake people make. See what your department heads already are gathering, what information. Do they have, for example, an inventory of their business processes that they consider key for them to fulfill their functions? Have they identified certain regulatory requirements that they have that they're attempting to fulfill, rather than you come in and say, well, I have this list. Are these the things that you're concerned about? You really have to get out into your operating functions to understand what they're doing. And unfortunately, sometimes when I speak to my colleagues, they don't get out in the field very often. But when you sit up in headquarters, you really do need to get out into the subsidiaries and affiliates to understand what their processes are and what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And therefore, you would get a better sense of what type of data exists and what may be important to you and, again, obviously to your board.
Mm-hmm. And when you're looking at that data and sifting through it and trying to find useful information you can present to your board, oftentimes organizations will turn to tools, technical tools. Mm-hmm. And that brings up another important question. When you're implementing tools and technology, what are some things to keep in mind, especially with a larger organization like MTA?
Well, when I first started, some of our subsidiaries were, for example, managing their risk assessments using Excel, using spreadsheets. Mm-hmm. Others were using homegrown databases. Some of them were just using word processing type documents. And all this information was flowing up to me from the various subsidiaries and affiliates. And you end up at the end of the day with folders full of documents without a lot of meaning to them. Mm-hmm. Because what you end up seeing is you see a lot of trees, but you don't get to see the full the forest. And so what we really wanted to do when we implemented our technology platform was to be able to see not only the trees, but the forest, to see where things might be going wrong, mm-hmm. To get that enterprise view of our compliance programs, our risk programs, and our governance programs as well. Because the MTA integrates all three within my responsibility.
Okay. And that brings up another important question. You have these different areas that you're looking at. When you're putting together a plan to gather a lot of data and to use technology, who needs to be on that team?
Everybody you can possibly get. All your stakeholders need to have at least a voice. You know, when you are implementing, especially if you're implementing new technology, you are going to meet some resistance. And for us, it really started with our board and getting our board to understand the need to get that enterprise view, to be able to manage the compliance data that we were dealing with. Literally, we would take a box and here are all the Excel spreadsheets and the Word documents, and we're going to certify to all of this. Well, what's in there? I don't know. They're boxes full of Excel spreadsheets and other documents, and we're not really sure. Now, some of our subsidiaries have done a very good job creating very useful Excel and spreadsheets, but what we were lacking was a consistency across the subsidiaries and our affiliates. So by using a single platform, we were able to kind of get everybody online and allow us to take a look at our business processes, how a risk in one subsidiary may affect another, which was something that was very difficult to do the way we were doing things before. So in terms of partners, you need your board. We had, obviously, our IT department was very involved. Our internal audit group was a key player in this as well. And then the heads of our various operating departments were also very key players in this.
And on an ongoing basis, do you have that kind of standing committee still involved in the process?
Well, we have what we call an Enterprise Risk Management Committee, which is composed of representatives from all our various affiliates and subsidiaries. So it is an ongoing process. You know, it is not something that you can buy a package off the shelf, put it in, and walk away. It is constantly evolving. I can tell you there is not a meeting that we've had in which somebody said, well, I wish the technology could do this. Can we do this? Which also is a danger as well, because once you've implemented the technology, then you have this need to have reports. And one of the things I found that you can end up getting into report overload when you're getting so much information that you really at some point then have to decide what is significant, what's important to you, which doesn't really sound like a problem, but believe me, it really is.
Well, let's focus on that. You get your arms around a lot of this data through the tools and mechanisms you put in place. How do you make that determination? What's the process you go through to determine what's important, what's not?
It was for me, it was a learning curve. I mean, as the Chief Compliance Officer, my first inclination was, wow, this is great. I now can find out the status of testing going all the way down the line. I can now look at status of every audit recommendation that exists everywhere, so I could do all this wonderful drill down. And I will tell you, the first couple of months, I was getting all these automated reports about all this information until I realized, well, now I've got another problem. First, I didn't know what was in there, but now I have so much information, I can't do anything with it. So it really was a situation where you have to sit down and think what is really critical for you to know. And what's critical for me to know within the system is very different than what is critical for someone in one of our operating departments to know. But being able to provide that information to both of us in the way that we need to see it is a very big plus for us.
And then how does that process then determine what you're going to report to the board? Because that's one of your primary responsibilities, is to take that data and put it into some sort of manageable form for the board. And I think that's another thing that probably a lot of the folks that are watching are considering, is how do I get my arms around it and get it to the board? What are some considerations there?
Well, it's actually kind of the same kind of considerations. I mean, one of the things that you're going to find is that depending on your board, when you tell them that they now can access all this wonderful information and all these reports, you're going to have some board members who are going to want to see everything until they realize everything is 2,000 different variations on the same report. Do you really need to see all that information? I mean, what is it that you really want to know? Do you want to know if there is for example, a material deficiency related to the preparations of our financials? Yes, I want to know that. I want to know that real time. You know, so you really have to get to the point where you understand what the information is that you have. And what is it that you as an individual using the system want to see. And I realized very quickly that for me, You know, I want to see those things that are going to make me have to pick up the phone in the middle of the night and call our chairman or somebody else and say, we have a problem, you might want to wake up now.
the call that you have to make but you don't want to make.
I don't want to make, but you know, have to make.
Yep.
So we really struggled with that for a while, but I think we're at a much better place, and it gives us a lot of options that we didn't have before. Like I said, we can see that forest now, and we can see where the trees are dying and need a little extra care. We can see where the forest is growing wild and may need to be trimmed back a little bit. So it gives us a lot of analytic tools that we didn't have before.
And that's really the key. Well, we could talk about technology and compliance and how to implement these tools for a long time, but we're unfortunately out of time. But I can't thank you enough, Lamond, for taking a few minutes to talk to us about how MTA uses the data that it is collecting and the tools that it uses to
It's always my pleasure.
This concludes this edition of Inside Compliance from NYSE Governance Services. We thank you for joining us and hope that you join us next time for the next edition.